Good evening. I call this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville to order and welcome the many members of the public who've joined us tonight. Madam Clerk, could you count for us our regrets this evening?
Yes, this evening we have regrets from Councillor Khan and Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Council, are there declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. We need a mover and a seconder to resolve in the committee of the whole. Oh, well then. Hello, the bus, as we used to say in television world. Can you maybe adjust our volume back there? Testing 1, 2, 8, 9, 7, 3, 10, 14, 15, 16, louder, more. A little bit more. 2 more stops, please. All right, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see nods, I see smiles. It's good now? Thank you, everybody in the bus. So we've resolved, we're about to resolve into committee of the whole. As soon as I get a seconder from Councillor Johnston and call the vote, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries, and we are now in committee of the whole. Tonight's agenda is divided into consent items, public hearing items, and discussion items. There's a couple of corrections to note. For example, public hearing item section lists 2 and 2A as public hearings, but actually the public hearings were already held, according to the clerk. The agenda actually says it was deferred from, right? So, is it a public hearing or not?
It's a discussion item.
So now it's a discussion item. So we'll move 2 and 2A down to discussion items, and that section will begin with item number 3. In the meantime, we have consent items. Council, the first and only public consent item is the deeming bylaw 2012-036. A consent item means the clerk and staff anticipate there's no need for discussion. Now is when we find out whether they were right or not. Council, I look for Councillor Duddick. Councillor Duddick moves the consent item. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That was me voting for it, by the way. Just slow. That carries. Now, Council, you have 3 confidential consent items before you. Can you deal with those on a consent basis, or do you need to go into camera for them? Councillor Bird?
I would prefer that we remove them to the end of the agenda and with the intent of going into camera.
Yes, sir. It shall be as you suggest. And that brings us to our first public hearing item. And public hearing item is the public meeting and recommendation report on the draft plan of condominium for Brawny Creek Community Limited, 2495 Colonel William Drive. And before we begin, here is the obligatory public hearing statement. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submission to the Town of Oakville in respect of a proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and/or plan of subdivision or condominium, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Municipal Board and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, this always kills me, in the opinion of the board there are reasonable grounds to do so. So it's a classic, no appeal, it's unless they feel different. So with that, we turn our attention now to our senior planner, Mr. Rob Dunn.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of council. Tonight we have an application submitted by Brawny Creek Developments Limited related to a draft plan of condominium to create common element condominium reflecting a private road network, landscaping, visitors parking, a community mailbox, and a landscape buffer along Colonel William Parkway. This is all associated with an 89-unit townhouse development on that street. The report tonight can be found on page 13 of tonight's agenda. And the purpose of tonight is to review the planning application in conjunction, as you had mentioned, the statutory public meeting. Council may hear from delegations on the application, may ask questions for clarification, and identify planning issues. Staff have provided a recommendation at the end for council's consideration on this matter. site itself is bound to the north by Dundas Street, to the east by 14 Mile Creek Valley, to the south by future residential development proposed by Pineberry Developments, and to the west by Colonel William Parkway. The subject land is designated as high-density residential and medium-density residential on Schedule H, the West Land Use Plan to the Tazewell Oakville Plan. From a zoning perspective, the site is zoned R08 and R8 with special provisions, as you can see on the overhead. The site was the subject of an OMB hearing in 2003, and it was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board. The subject property tonight is the last phase from the Monarch Development lands west of Brawny Creek. Final site plan approval was granted to this development on February 23rd of this year. The part line applications related to the creation of the townhouse units will be coming in shortly. Notice of this meeting was mailed to the residents within 120 meters of the site and was contained within the Oakville Beaver. Through the circulation, no concerns were raised during the processing, and the conditions of draft approval are attached in Appendix A to tonight's staff report. So in conclusion, Mayor Burton and members of council, staff report for council's consideration the following recommendation, as you can see from the overhead. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Council and I appreciate the summary you've given us of the report for the public's benefit. Are there any members of the public here with information for council on this application or this recommendation? Going twice, 3 times. Councilor Elgar.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of questions. First of all, regarding parking, this is an extremely congested area. Does it meet all the specifications from a parking point of view?
Parking standards were included as part of the site plan process. You will see that there's 23 parking spaces throughout the site.
And as far as when people are buying, there would be a sign telling them about the amount of parking there will be?
It will be included in the condominium declarations.
Okay. As far as snow plowing, it was going to be snow removal or plowing? I don't see where you'd ever plow snow on that.
Through the site plan process, there were areas designated for snow storage.
Right, okay. So
plowing.
Okay, they do apply, okay. Okay, I'll move staff recommendation.
Thank you, Councilor Elgar. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. That brings us to our second public hearing item, and this is the public meeting report on an application by Fernbrook Homes, a proposed zoning bylaw amendment, a draft plan of subdivision, and a draft plan of condominium. And the recommendation is that the comments from the public regarding these applications be received, and we'll be entertaining comments from the public momentarily. But we'll begin with Charles McConnell, who's our designated hitter tonight, the manager of current planning, to review for us the report that council has on the matter. Mr. McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council, and members of the public. Thank you for attending tonight's public meeting. The next item for consideration this evening is the public hearing item number 4, and it can be found on page 29 in your agenda. This item relates to a planning application for a proposed plan of subdivision, a proposed plan of condominium, and a corresponding zoning amendment application, which has been submitted by Fernbrook Homes, Lakeshore Limited. The purpose of this meeting is to introduce the planning application in conjunction with the statutory public meeting. Council will hear public delegations on the application, ask questions of clarification, and identify planning issues. The report is to be received, and no decisions will be made at this time. The application proposes to rezone and subdivide the lands to permit the development of 3 single-detached residential dwelling units fronting onto Lakeshore Road and 42 semi-detached dwellings, which will be located on the interior of the site on the plan of condominium. The subject lands are located on the north side of Lakeshore Road West between Willow Ridge Court and Sandwell Drive, west of 4th Line. The address of the property is 1215 Lakeshore Road West. The property is presently occupied by a place of worship, being the Harvest Bible Chapel, which is relocating elsewhere in the municipality, and it also contains daycare, educational, and ancillary office uses. The property is approximately 2.66 hectares in size and is regularly shaped, or fairly regularly shaped, except for the southwest corner where a previously severed lot was created and is now occupied by a single detached dwelling. The main access for vehicles to the site is by a driveway from Lakeshore Road. A connection to School Gate, which is a road to the northwest, is obtained through a gate in the fence along that area. With respect to the adjacency and the adjacent land uses in the area, you'll see that the lands to the north are occupied by T.A. Blakelock High School, and to the east and west are single detached residential dwellings. Across Lakeshore Road West to the south side is a continuation of the residential land uses in the form also of single detached residential dwellings. On the property itself, there are located 2 easements. The first is in favor of the Halton District School Board and provides access for pedestrians along the full length of the westerly limit of the property, coming up this side. And the easement contains an informal footpath connecting Lakeshore Road West to the school site itself. Access to the school is achieved through 2 gates in the fence along the northerly limits of the property. The second easement is in favor of the region of Halton and crosses the northerly limit of the property, as indicated by way of a sanitary sewer easement. The town of Oakville owns a 1-foot reserve at the easterly limit of School Gate, and the 1-foot reserves are typically intended to restrict access from private property onto a public right-of-way. The subject lands are found within the stable residential community and are designated as low-density residential in the livable Oakville official plan. These lands are subject to the policies found in Part D, Section 11, being the residential policies, and these include policies governing intensification within stable residential neighborhoods. Under these policies, these subject lands are classified as a site with existing non-residential uses where appropriate intensification may be considered as part of a development application, subject to the policy criteria for evaluating development within all stable residential communities and all other applicable policies of the plan. The policy criteria for evaluating development within stable residential communities includes residential compatibility in terms of scale, height, massing, setbacks, separation distances, and lotting pattern, as well as the provision of full municipal services, transportation facilities, and access to community amenities are also required. In addition to the policies for development within stable residential neighborhoods, the residential policies may permit a range of low-density residential housing types, including detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and duplexes, at a density of up to 29 dwelling units per site hectare. A portion of these lands across the southerly portion in front of Lakeshore Road are designated as a special policy area, which is intended to protect the unique large lot, large home character of the area. Intensification shall be limited to development which maintains the integrity of the large lots at a density not to exceed 10 units per hectare. The lands are zoned presently as residential RO1 and RO2 and are subject to the regulations of Part 2, Residential Zones of Zoning Bylaw number 1984-63. These zones permit detached residential dwellings and a variety of community uses. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would rezone the lands in 2 separate ways. Firstly, the lands along Lakeshore Road West would be rezoned to a residential RO1 with a special provision intended to permit the proposed detached dwellings. The second would see the balance of the site be rezoned to the residential RO7 zone with a special provision intended to permit the proposed semi-detached residential dwelling units. This concept map, Mr. Chairman, indicates by the dots, in red being the single detached dwellings, and the blue and the green represent the semi-detached residential units. The plan of subdivision indicates the block pattern that would be created, and the plan of condominium roadway is also shown as a block So from the perspective of consultation and review, there has been a previous public information meeting which was held on January 28, 2012, and through the circulation of the application, correspondence has been received from both the public and technical review agencies. So there are a number of policy issues and statements that staff refer to in the evaluation of an application, as well as a number of other technical issues which staff has to concern itself with in its review of the application as well. And they are listed here, ranging from conformity with the applicable livable Oakville policies, the suitability of the zoning amendment to regulate the land uses as proposed, consistent with the policies found in livable Oakville with respect to urban design, streetscape, and landscape, compatibility with the existing neighborhood compatibility and the character of that area, potential impacts on the functional servicing from a sanitary and stormwater perspective, and the supply of water, the suitability of the proposed private road to sustain the development that's proposed, the impact from increased vehicular traffic, parking and circulation are evaluated, the suitability of the transportation and the transit systems to handle the additional growth, and the servicing and the utility capacities, as well as financial impacts. So to date, Mr. Chairman, there have been a number of concerns that have been expressed by the public. The staff analysis of the application to date has identified conformity concerns with respect to certain aspects of the livable Oakville official plan. These include the application of the criteria for intensification as development within a stable residential community as set out in sections 11.1.8 and 11.1.9 of the official plan. Staff have conveyed these issues and concerns to the applicant to date. The applicant has expressed a willingness at this point in time to consider potential revisions to the application. Staff will continue to work with the applicant on the conformity, technical issues, and public issues raised to date, Mr. Chairman. We will complete the analysis of the application and the recommendation, and we'll bring forward a recommendation for council's consideration. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Councillor Dudek is first.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Councillor DeMoff and I believe several other councillors today received a letter from a constituent of ours voicing their concerns, and just to reassure them, they will be captured in the ultimate report that will be forthcoming to council, so they don't have to worry about it not being circulated on our desks.
That's correct. We do have copies of that.
Okay.
So we'll take that into consideration.
I noticed on page 42 of our report tonight on the agenda that you provided an outline of the comparisons between the zonings. Let me just see here where I've got it. And the one concern I have is you've shown R01, you've shown special R01 provision. But given the fact that there are considerable concerns pertaining to the interior of the site, namely the fact that the majority of the individuals, in fact I haven't heard one who has not said, that they don't want single detached dwellings. There is no comparison between the R02 zoning, which is on the site currently, compared to what the applicant is requesting for those interior sites. Is that something that maybe we could have at an upcoming meeting just to assist when we do get to the decision-making process?
Yes,
That might be helpful?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And on that same vein, on page 11 of the applicant's submission, he refers to R06 as being the special section being used on the interior of the site, and yet we refer to R07. So which one is it? Is our reference R07 correct, or is the applicant mistaken by referring to R06 in his...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the best of my knowledge, it is the R07. We can certainly clarify that, and if there is a confusion, we will certainly clarify that in the recommendation report.
I'm just concerned it wasn't caught before now, and I guess that's what gave me concern. The other thing, and I know you've outlined briefly sort of an overview, the previous meetings that were scheduled 4 members of the public, and we heard they were very, very well attended, I must say. But in addition to some of the ones that you've outlined there, and I dare say there'll be members of the public speaking to it as well, but I also heard concerns relating to height, drainage, grading, and pedestrian school access to the site. So just to make sure those are captured, as I say, probably it'll be given in the context of someone's presentation, but I didn't want to have them missed.
Thank you.
The other thing is, if the applicant were to comply with the existing R02 zoning on the site, given that they're proposing a condominium road and that has a bearing as opposed to a public roadway, basically how many single dwellings would that result in for an application if we were to go with the existing R02 zoning?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but if it were an R02 zone on a public road, it would be, if memory serves me correctly, it would be in the neighborhood of 14 to 18 units in that magnitude. We would certainly do that complete analysis in the report, and could present that as a
That would be helpful if you could give us the variation between a condominium roadway and a public roadway. That would be helpful. And the rest of my questions, sorry, Your Worship, will be for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dedek. Others? All right then. Madam Clerk, do we have registered delegations?
Yes, we do.
Well then, how many do you have then?
6 registered delegations.
All right. We'll have the clerk call the registered delegations, and then I'll poll the audience for any volunteers. And as always, my free advice is, if you agree with something that's been said before you, the more effective way to persuade council is to say, I agree with the person who said X, not to repeat it, but you're of course free to do it either way. Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation is Mary Jo Hildebrandt.
Ms. Hildebrand? Maybe you could give them the next name and they can move into position.
And the next delegate after Mary Jo is David Schemhilt.
So, Ms. Hildebrand, actually the spot is over here. Let me read out the 6 delegations, and hopefully, as a courtesy to council, you could arrange yourselves in the room so that you could come up here in order. We have Mary Jo Hildebrand, David Schemelt, Pam Knight, Don Cox, Peter Donlevy, and Blair Magtalo. Hopefully I haven't mangled anybody's name. And thank you very much. And Ms. Hildebrand, thank you for coming, and council looks forward to your information.
My name is Mary Jo Hildebrandt. I'm a lifetime resident of Oakville and a local residential realtor and broker serving the Oakville market for over 25 years. We live in beautiful Coronation Park, and I treasure our town's character and charm, and preserving what is left of this is of utmost importance to my family and I. As Oakville residents, we are currently left with a limited number of properties within Oakville, or limited area properties within Oakville, that have the opportunity to retain and protect the special characteristics of our town. Southwest Oakville is known for its mainly single detached dwellings, wide streets, deep and wide lots, mature vegetation, and generous setbacks. As a realtor, I've listed and sold a number of properties in Coronation Park and the Southwest map areas, and my experience is as follows. Many moving into Coronation Park do so specifically to distance themselves from the high-density areas of the north. Many owners live in the original homes in Coronation Park and the Southwest with a long-term plan to renovate or rebuild, but have had the security of a large lot, an area of detached homes, whereby they believe they are protected by town planning to retain the zoning. Others have chosen to sacrifice their initial desires for a large-scale home on a small lot to gain the benefits of mature vegetation, low-density housing, and so forth. As a realtor, I've always emphasized to buyers that we will never see lots of this size again, and Oakville is a town that protects the existing zoning of older neighborhoods. They've had the comfort and peace of mind of being confident that they will reside in an area where the lion's share of housing is fully detached dwellings, and one where the zoning to protect those attributes is firmly in place. We are opposed to the proposed development of the parcel of land at 1215 Lakeshore Road. We welcome the redevelopment of the land to enhance the Coronation Park area and would support a future development that conforms to the current zoning of the land, R01 and R02. We believe that this would provide for approximately 22 to 25 detached homes designed with character and charm to protect the existing canvas of the area. At previous meetings, the proponent expressed to the residents that they believed we were opposed to any changes at all and that we as residents do not want any intensification in our area. I believe we do favor modest intensification, which will change an existing single-building church structure and replace it with 22 to 25 homes in the present zoning. Is this not change? And lastly, I question whether the proponent has been taken on an informative driving tour of South Oakville to compare to North Oakville, where the majority of Fernbrook's developments have taken place in large-scale subdivisions. I would like to believe that upon completion of such a tour, it would be crystal clear why we as residents are opposing this proposed plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Questions? Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
It's David Schemmelt.
Sorry, I'm a rookie here, so I'm assuming...
Well, we have help right at hand, right beside you there. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
And then moves from screen to screen, I do it. Okay, thank you.
There you go. Easy as pie, right?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is David Schemmelt. I live at 201 Tweedsdale, which would be lot 47 on your plan. I'm second house south of Schoolgate, so I have a front row seat to what's going on. My objective here tonight is to give you a little bit of an idea of the characteristics of our neighborhood and why it's special to us. For those that are not familiar with it, I do have some pictures just to help us along a little bit. I've lived here for about 15 years. I was originally out in the country, came to the area, I was looking for something a little more with a rural-like setting. Obviously, the other things that you want in a town, access to the GO train and so forth. We found the Coronation Park area fit that bill for me. So what defines us? Mature trees. The planning justification report reports that the church property has about 47 trees larger than 15 centimeters. I'd like to tell you that in my lot alone I have 10. So I have 20% of what they have, and I just have a small lot. The proposal that they put forth sort of indicates to me that they'll never have any more than the 47 trees. There's not enough space in that lot for anything else to grow. The other thing we look forward to is the open space, the natural landscape. Vegetation predominates over the built-up environment. We do not want to live in a neighborhood where the houses dominate. We want to live in a neighborhood where the natural landscape dominates. So to do that, we've got spacious rear yards and private open space. I can barbecue right now in my backyard and no one else can see me. If I stand in the middle of my backyard, only 2 neighbors can look into my backyard from only 3 windows. This is what's important to us. The area is bungalows, 1.5-story and 2-story homes. My house was built in the late 50s by Wimpy. At that time, they were building bungalows. Of the 5 houses that are on the west side of the property, 4 of them are bungalows. There's only one of them that's a 2-story house. The 4th bungalow did have a 2nd floor added above the garage. Otherwise, it's all bungalows. The mapping has little visual impact on adjacent buildings. So as I'm sitting in my backyard, I don't have to worry about anybody towering over my backyard. The building heights are all uniform. They're all under 8 meters currently. Even the 2 houses on Tweeds that were rebuilt within the last number of years were rebuilt within the rules of the bylaws. A special note, when you review the planning justification report that Ferndale has proposed, they give you photographs of two houses on Tweedsdale. One is of the rebuilt house, I'm sorry, I don't have it here, and another house. Neither one of those houses actually backs onto the church property. The one rebuilt is up the street, and the other one backs onto the high school. But as I say, the 5 houses that back onto the church are bungalows, except for the one. We've got generous separation between homes. As an avid gardener, I appreciate the necessity of having plenty of light and airflow between the buildings to plant a garden and something other than just shade grass. The homes have ample setback distances from the street. I'll show you some pictures later on. The minimum setbacks that Fernbrook has proposed leaves little room for anything other than just to park a car out front. Your streetscape will be dominated by a curb, a sidewalk, a car, and a house. There will be no room for a garden as a centerpiece. So let's have a look at what we have. So this photograph, the one on the left, is a picture of Lakeshore looking looking east. If there was no trees, you'd be able to see 9 houses. But with proper setbacks, room for foliage to grow, you cannot see those 9 houses. If you turn and face south, you'd be looking down Wolfdale. Here again, there's about 5 houses in that photograph. You can barely make out the outline of 2 homes. This is what is the character of this neighborhood. Next series of photographs. First one would be my house. And you can see the front of the house is dominated by the garden. Yes, you can see the garage. My neighbor's house, this is the house lower left corner. That is the biggest house that we have on the west side. And then again, farther on down, again, bungalows. There's generous space between the houses. You can tell by the picture on the left. There's ample space between the 2 buildings for trees. The trees in the back stand about 70 feet high. They need about 30 to 40 feet. You won't be getting anything like that if the plan as proposed goes ahead. The next photograph on the right, again, this is actually looking north on Tweedsdale, where all 5 houses that are on the west border of the church are visible. Unfortunately, you can't see them because they're set back properly from the street. There's generous space between them, and the trees have been allowed to grow. Again, we're back. Now I'm up on Tweedsdale, at the corner of Tweedsdale and Schoolgate, looking south. Again, this example is to show the proper setbacks. Looking south here, there is 12 houses. You can make out maybe 3 or 4 of them. We've got proper setbacks. The next house on the right, again, we're looking now down Wolfdale. There's about 4 houses there. Proper setbacks, you can make out 2. So, why we chose this area? It's a real sense of community. Halloween typically has about 25 kids. For the last 16 years, that number hasn't seemed to change. School gates have occasionally been used for street parties. Ball hockey's back on the street. Dog walkers are very regular, some of whom you get to know regular and are always willing to stop and chat. There's room to grow. We've added a mudroom onto our house. We've done extensive renovations to the house. However, we've always maintained the integrity of the original home. Mature trees, as I mentioned earlier, we saw pictures of trees that are in 60 to 80 feet. Large lots, my lot's 75 by 150 feet. That gives me over 11,000 square feet of space. When we bought this house, there was a certain level of expectation when you invest in a community, especially a mature community, because I bought the house, the community was over 40 years old. There was a certain expectation that the community will remain the same. The character of the community will remain the same, the ambiance will remain. In other words, no semi-detached homes, no townhouses. There's a bit of a rural feel to the area, as you saw by the trees, separation, the gardens. We found what we were looking for when we bought this house, a raised 3-bedroom home, built in the late 50s, needed a little bit of renovation, but it was livable. The distinct character that defines the area is the large lots, ample space between houses, and privacy is what defines this area. People living in this area take their yards seriously. My house and 3 other homes in the immediate area have all been on the Oakville garden tour. We all have different strengths. Mine was the fact that I have a yard with plenty of trees. However, there's still plenty of room for the children to play. In summary, we do oppose the Fernbrook application as presented. We do not oppose development. We support development that honors the existing bylaws, R01, R02. We wish to preserve and protect the character of the neighborhood and not destabilize the existing ambiance. I just wanted to show you two other photographs if that's at all possible.
It is. We have an overhead projector in front of you. The pad for it is to your right. And if you put your photograph face up there,
John?
we'll eventually catch up with you, and your picture will appear. There you go.
This is my backyard. There's enough room in my backyard to put the giant play center and still have plenty of room for gardening. I'm 75 feet wide. Obviously, you can see the church in the background. If the Fern Brook proposal would never permit anything of that scale. Turn around, face the other way. I can stand in my backyard, I can barbecue. There's a barbecue area in here. There's actually a table up in this area, and this is just turning around the other way. There'll be no opportunity for any sort of play areas for children or seriousness in gardening. They mentioned in the Fernbrook application, they talk about enhanced landscaping opportunities. I do not understand what they mean by that because I do not see where that's possible. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your information. I don't actually see any questions, but thank you very much for coming and bringing your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Is Pam Knight, representing Coronation Park Residents Association.
Ms. Knight, welcome. Council looks
Thank you,
forward to
sir.
your
I'll just wait
information.
for this to come up.
Oh, we'll get you assistance right now. We're going back to the computer. Look at that, it's happening faster and faster. Now we just need to change the presentation to hers.
Oh, good. Very much better than the old keyboard.
Sorry, I did not catch your name.
It's Coronation Park, this one right here, yeah.
Perfect.
Excellent, thank you.
That's the change.
Thanks very much. Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. This particular application that you're looking at falls within the boundaries of the Coronation Park Residents Association. Thus, we're here this evening to provide our input. We realize that you're not voting on this application this evening, but we want to make sure that when you get to that point that you do indeed possess all the facts and that you get a sense of the sentiment within the community. I'm going to take you through an overview of the application. Some people who follow me will get into it in more detail into some specific aspects. So let's get going. The gentleman who preceded me mentioned what the area is like immediately beside this particular site. What I'd like to do is just kind of pan out a little bit and look at the community overall. And when you look at this zoning map, you'll see that with the exception of a small R05 development, the entire area is nothing but R01, R02, and R1. That little development is actually some seniors' homes near Woodside Library. And when they were constructed, they as well are single-story, 1.5 and 2. So even though the density there is a little bit higher than what surrounds it, they actually blend in quite nicely with the neighborhood. Again, Mr. Chenault went through some of the characteristics that define the neighborhood. And once again, I think that if we look at the community as a whole, you can see those same characteristics present themselves. So lots of mature trees, ample vegetation, large lots, exclusively bungalows, 1.5-story, 2-story homes. Building heights are uniformly under 8 feet with those older homes. There's a lot of infill obviously happening, and they pretty much adhere to 9 meters. Generous separation between homes. They've got deep setbacks, wide roads with a good allowance, and if you look at lot coverage, you'll find that it's at or under 30%. I think one of the most marked things that we can talk about in this application is the fact that it is full of exceptions.
I looked at a letter that I had written several weeks ago about it, and I think I counted more than a dozen different exceptions on this particular application. In the R01, for instance, which, as we all know, in the latest official plan, R01 was given a bit of a special place in our hearts. And even in that particular area, this application is looking for exceptions. They like to build 3 single detached homes on lots that are 28% smaller than the minimum, with reduced frontage, reduced side and rear setbacks, increased lot coverage, and FAR of 40%. Whereas if you're looking at a normal R01 lot, which is about 1,393 square meters, that FAR would be about 26%. They want 11-meter buildings, and we'll touch on this again later, but in actual fact, those buildings tend to be higher than that for those people surrounding this site. As well, third-level lots and mezzanines where, as we know, there are none in these zones. In terms of the R02, we're into 42 semi-detached homes in an area where there are none. Buildings, again, of 11 meters, and again, those third-level lofts. Instead of the current R02 lot size of 836 square meters, the applicant's plan would make them 365 square meters. It's interesting to note that, in fact, that the applicant's request for 365 is actually even lower than the minimum of the R07 that it's seeking. As well, the applicant seeks reduced lot frontage, reduced setbacks, reduced lot coverage, increased lot coverage, and when we get to that far again, they like a total exception to that one. When we look at it on a chart, we start to see the impact that this has. We believe that approximately 22 units would happen on the site if the current zoning was preserved. And you can see that if you compare that to what happens if we build something that the application wants, the actual density on the site would double compared to what the present zoning would deliver. Again, you can see that we've noted R01 at the top of each cell and then R02 right below it, and impact on the right-hand side. So you can see that when we go through things like lot size, frontage, side yards, front setbacks, they're all reduced considerably. When we talk about height and number of stories, again, we're going from 9 meters up to 11 meters. We've got an area of 2 stories, and while, again, the justification report says that these are 2-story structures, in actual fact, with a third-level loft and a mezzanine, to me, that's a third level. That's a third story. So when we put that together with the fact that there will be a raised road in this site, and it's suggested that those structures will be measured from that raised road, what that then turns out to be is structures that will be in excess of 13 meters for neighboring properties. And again, we'll go into some detail on this later. When we look at lot coverage, again, in the R02, it increases by 35%. There was nothing specified in the R01. And then back into the FAR again, 26% would be permitted. They're looking for 40. And in terms of the R02, it's kind of anyone's guess because they're looking for an exemption there, so we're not really sure what that would turn out to be. When we start to think about this and what the impact of this would be in the neighborhood that you've seen and described, and try to sort of envision what this is going to look like, we get something like this. It's a dense mass of large, tall structures, closely spaced on reduced side lots that dwarf the older homes abutting them. And I have to apologize for the Emerald City gone wrong, but it's a personal observation of mine. That's sort of what springs to mind when I think about the size of these structures in this particular site. The fact. The application in question wants to change an established community that's exclusively R01 and R02 single-family, fully detached homes of approximately 8 meters in height to one that will include semi-detached units that will result in building heights in excess of 11 meters for neighboring properties. It represents an increase in density in a stable neighborhood that's not marked for that level of intensification. It wishes to decrease setbacks, frontages, and lot sizes while increasing lot coverage, FAR, and building height. It proposes to construct homes with third-level lots and mezzanines in an older established neighborhood where current zoning actually protects those neighbors from overlooked situations. It represents a proposal that doesn't support the integrity or the character of the surrounding area. An acceptance of this particular application would set a dangerous precedent. I've noted here, we know we've been to the OMB. I can honestly say that we witnessed lawyers who would travel several miles from a site in order to find another piece of land with a zoning that would suit their applicant's needs. So if we were to think that this would not set a precedent, then we're dreaming. On behalf of the community, we support development that protects the integrity and character of established neighborhoods. We want to continue to protect Lakeshore Road and its distinctive character, its large lot appeal. This application is excessive. It's what I would call a developer's home run. It will destroy the overall character of the neighborhood and indeed the Southwest Oakville ambiance. While the applicant points to the fact that the density of this development is within the allowed density range of up to 29 units per site hectare, let's remember that's a maximum. As well, when we look at the official plan, we'll see that in the implementation section, it notes that zoning bylaws may be more restrictive and that it's not intended that the full range of densities will be permitted in all locations. That completes my comments, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for your information. Councillor Dudek has a question.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I didn't think you could get better than the one that you presented on Hush Homes, but you've exceeded that by far. The only comment I would suggest that given the context of the picture you showed, you didn't end on "there's no place like home."
Yeah, I should have done that. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, Mr. Cox is next.
Don Cox.
Welcome, Mr. Cox. Council looks forward to your information, which I gather might be part two.
That's right. Thank you, Your Worship. Councilors, we've been here before. My picture, or my portion of the presentation, is mostly photographs and images. I've actually used factual data from the Fernbrook Planning Justification Report and the Functional Servicing Report to portray what this development will look like, and I'll compare and contrast that with the surrounding community. And I think if I get this right. No? Okay. I missed a slide there somewhere. There it is. Okay. The presentation will deal with essentially density, elevation, building height, three key factors that affect, that come into play in compatibility discussions. This is a picture approaching the site from the west. That's the sanctuary you can see in the background. This picture moves a little further back, a little further westward on Lakeshore Road, and from the left side of that picture all the way to the bare deciduous trees is the expanse of that property. This picture at the easterly end, this mound, is about 1¼ meters above the edge of Lakeshore Road that you can see. The new development height will be 1¼ meters higher than that highest point on that mound. That's roughly what we're looking at for development. So I'm going to ask you to actually visualize some of the things I will be talking about so you can have your own view of what this will look like as I go through this presentation. So just keep that in your mind. And then the land will flow upwards from there as you head northwards. That is one mishmash. That happens to be page 22 of the Functional Servicing Report. Is the concept grading plan. And when you blow that up, there's a phenomenal amount of information in it. It's got all of the elevation points. So we have actually used that, I've used that, and taken the liberty to fill in the squares that are identified on that map showing the buildings, and that's where the gray area is. We've done that to show the density and the proximity of those buildings. Now what I would like you to do is to pretend that you're standing, if I can work, oops, I've lost it. Okay, standing about here, and I will actually go through and try to describe what this will look like as you stand in that section of the street. I'll describe the streetscape here, looking up that road. This row of semis, each one of those is a semi-detached, there's 2 homes in each one of those buildings, and this row of semis are 18.5 meters apart at the front face of the building. That's less than the road allowance of a town road. The middle section there is a 9.5 meter condo road allowance. That comprises the asphalt, the curbs, and the sidewalk. The front setback, keep losing the mouse here. The front setback is 4.5 meters to the front of the house, 6 meters to the garages. We were told at the public information meeting that these semis would have double garages. A double garage typically has a 6 meter wide driveway. 2 6 meter wide driveways in that space, that setback, takes up quite a bit more than 50% of that front yard. So what you have looking down this road is a tunnel that's 18.5 inches wide with an impervious layer of 85% of that land. That's a summation of the roadway and the driveways. So there's about 15% of that land, that horizontal surface, that you could use for grass and trees or what have you. That's what you've got. So I ask you to visualize in your mind. It's basically, I characterize as a tunnel with a roof removed. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to have a little discussion about this part of the development. That's where we get into the elevations. The edge of Lakeshore, this is Lakeshore Road down here. The edge of Lakeshore Road is shown as, and I was hoping I could read it on here, but I can't, is 82.6 meters. I assume that's from sea level. That's the edge of the asphalt all along here. You can read that one. That is, so it's 82.6 meters. That is 84.82 meters, the corner of that lot, which is the first house, the R01 house on Lakeshore Road. That is more than 2 meters higher over the distance of that lot. We're talking about going up like about this much from Lakeshore Road. Another very interesting point in the application is that is requested to be the established grade for this lot. The request is to put an 11 meter high house on this lot using that as the reference point. That makes the house 13.2 meters above Lakeshore Road. And to help matters, the request is for a 4.2 meter setback from Lakeshore Road. I ask you to imagine that in your mind. I think that's enough said about that one. Now I will go to the back of this lot. There we are. Can't quite see it. Okay. This line between lots 23 and 24, want to make sure I got my numbers right here, as an established grade of 85.17 meters at the road and 83.5 meters at the back. You can actually see that, which is the existing height. So there's a drop of about 1.5 meters. What's really interesting, is the basement floor is at 83.48 meters. That house can be built laying the foundation basically on the existing ground. Don't have to dig a hole for the foundation of that house. It's also true for the house next to it. And there happen to be 9-foot ceilings in those basements. So you can picture what you're looking at if you're back here, and I think you're going to hear more from somebody later about that. So I just wanted to give you some of the facts. I'm asking you to picture this in your mind as I'm going through it. This is an example of what a 7-meter setback looks like on a condominium road to, this happens to be a single-family house. There's an SUV, and the garages in this development, the proposed development, are 6.5 meters to the road, so it'll be something less than that. Here is a 5.5 meter setback from the front face of a house. This development proposes 4.5 meters, so it would probably take it to about here. That's the setback we're dealing with. Okay, we're going to look at something else now. That covers that side. We're going to look at this side of the development, opposite Tweesdale. Interesting, I'll mention here, that 18.5 meter separation I mentioned here is actually less than the length of the driveway on that Teasdale house. 181, and I mentioned that one because we're going to do another little imagining exercise here. We put a camera in 181 Tweesdale backyard, and we did. Take a picture of that, looking this way towards the church, and this is what it looks like. So that house with the actually 20-meter long driveway still has a backyard of this size, looking out, and you can see the church in the background, very, very big building. But it's about 50 meters from that back fence right now, and it still looks pretty big. Incidentally, as best I could, I measured the height of that building. I won't tell you how I did it, but I did. And that building is between 11 and 12 meters high. It's more than 11, and it's less than 12 as best I could figure. So we're looking at something less than that building when we talk 11-meter high buildings. So kind of imagine that building moved to the back of that fence. And if you do, that's what you get. That's actually 11-meter high building, about 7.5 meters back from that fence. That's what you're looking at. You go from that to that. Now, what's also really, my time is up, I gotta move. What's really interesting is that is the best view that anybody will have in the subdivision, because on the Willowbridge side, the houses are even higher. Somebody wants to ask me some questions, I've got more.
Thank you, folks. And I was generous with you because we delayed you and the clock was running, getting the technical stuff going. But I believe there's an indication of questions from Councillor Duddick.
Okay.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Don, do you have any further information you'd like to share with us?
I do, thank you. Can I show you some pictures?
He did say he'd been here before.
Okay. If we have the lights come down a little bit, I appreciate it. And I will move quickly, I promise. This is a typical new development on Lakeshore Road. I keep a fairly close eye on what goes on in our neighborhood, as you might imagine. And when that house was, before the house was constructed, I looked around, I didn't see any signs appealing to the Committee of Adjustments for changes to the R1 bylaw. So I'm going to assume that house is built to the R1 limit. I can't prove it, but I'm going to assume it is, which makes it 9 meters and a 10.5 meter setback from the road. There's a house next to it. There's a house next to that. They're all basically the same height. You can see the distances between the homes. You can see the setback. That's 9 meters. Imagine 13.2 meters. Imagine 13.2 meters halfway to the road. That's what you get with the R1 homes. I'll cut it off there. That's enough. I think I got my point across. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Mr. Peter Donlevy.
Welcome, Mr. Donlevy. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I'll get out of this thing here. So, I can find mine, I think. Okay. My wife and I live at 187 Tweedsdale. Must say we look forward to the fact that development of the church property is going to eliminate what we call event traffic in our neighborhood. It gets quite intense on Sundays, on Wednesdays, on Saturday evenings, Saturdays as well. So we're really looking forward to that, but we do not support the current proposal by Fernbrook. And I'm going to share the reasons with you. My neighbors and colleagues have showed you the neighborhood in general. Just to make this a bit more personal, I'm going to give you a very quick briefing of our property. My wife is a very passionate gardener, as you'll see. There's our front garden. There's a container garden. My wife has over 80 plants that need to be overwintered, protecting. They come out in the good weather and they go hide for the bad weather. This is one of our 5 backyard gardens. All except the garden off the back fence line, which you can see, and the church in behind it. All of them require lots of sun and shade, and actually I think my wife is going to make a comment about that a little bit later. So we have a solarium that we've built onto our house where we put our container garden for the winter, where we generate some seedlings in the summer and get them ready for the spring. So that's our house, and that's going to hopefully set the stage as to why we're very personally upset against this thing. So why are we upset? If you look at the new buildings, we're going to get some real hard numbers now. I don't know why the developer didn't submit a site plan or floor plans as required, but it's easy enough to subtract the offsets from the lot sizes and come up with the size of the house. Now, imagine if you looked out your backyard and just past the fence, you saw the movie screen from the Oakville drive-in overlooking your fence. Now, in our case, that actually might be preferable, okay, because that movie screen is only 30 feet by 60 feet. The house that we'll see, as you saw from the graphic earlier, is 39 by 69 feet. It's going to dwarf our house. As David mentioned earlier, the majority of houses on Tweedsdale adjoining this are bungalows. Our house is 18 feet high. Okay? This thing is going to be 21 feet higher than it. Okay? That's just unimaginable. The space between the houses, again, Don was at the great pains to point out the small distance between the houses. That's just over 8 feet. If I look to one neighbor, we've got 60 feet between our houses. If I look to the other neighbor, we've got 33 feet. Okay, that's what we enjoy. That's the character of our neighborhood. Okay, this is nothing like this. We're going to lose sunlight. We're going to have increased shading. We're going to lose any privacy that we've got today, that we enjoy today. And on the last note, despite the funny emoticon, I'm not joking about that. We're going to be overwhelmed with these properties in our backyard. Okay. Now, Fernbrook's application is seeking approval by claiming that they support the high-level policies and objectives of the town plan, Livable Oakville. Okay? That's true. However, they totally ignore the approved land use implementation, which is R01 and R02. Okay? And as was mentioned earlier, okay, it's not intended that, all land usage will be approved. And in our case, in our whole southwest quadrant, it's not. It's R01 and R02. Okay? It's a very convenient oversight by Fernbrook's. Okay? Fortunately, we've got a great town plan. It's very protective of infill in established mature neighborhoods. Okay? Even goes so far as to define what compatible means, so that it's very clear when you try and apply the criteria for infill in a mature environment. Now, based on what my colleagues have shown you earlier tonight, pictorially, and what I'm going to show you further, we're going to dispute a number of inaccurate and misleading comments in the planning justification report, okay, regarding these criteria. We're going to show that we're going to suffer adverse impact on a number of the criteria, which is supposed to protect the character of our neighborhoods. Height, massing, architectural character and materials to be compatible with existing. Well, you've always seen what the height of the new buildings is going to do, how it's going to dwarf it. The width, 69 feet for a dwelling that we'll see, that's incredible compared to what we've got in the neighborhood. The density is totally out of character. And necessarily Willowboot style, but the Fernbrook style is pretty typical. It's ornate architecture, it's uniform color, and it's a cookie-cutter design. It's in stark contrast with the individual nature of our homes. Now, here's a picture from, we got this brochure in the mail last week. This is Fernbrook's latest Chateau Court in Bronte, I believe. This is very similar to the pictures that they showed the residents on 2 or 3 separate meetings. Okay, this is again uniform, color, character, monochrome. It's nothing like the individuality that David showed you earlier in the welcome to our neighborhood. Another intensification criteria: setback orientation and separation distances should be compatible. Well, the distance between houses is, they're asking for a 2.4 zoning. The existing zoning is 8.4, but again, that's the minimum. I've already explained to you earlier, we have 60 feet and 33 feet separation between houses. That's not uncharacteristic of the houses in the neighborhood. They're nowhere near the distances that are allowed. They want to reduce the front setback to 4.5 instead of 9. That's even worse when you visually take into account the difference between a public and a private road allowance. The LO1 lots on Lakeshore, they've actually, rather than, they talk about frontage, but they front the Crescent Road that they're putting in rather than fronting Lakeshore. So they want to use the side setback of 4.2 meters rather than what would have been 10.5 meters to set the houses back. So again, quite misleading, definitely not compatible. You're talking about a transition in height when you've got different land uses. I consider semi-detached dwellings to be a different land use. Maybe I'm wrong. But the height now of 11 meters versus the existing grade of 9, and then when you add the extra 1 meter of road height, again, this is a 39-foot house. It towers above our houses. Privacy and shadowing are also to be protected. Well, we're going to lose both of those battles. With a 39-foot house towering above us, we'll lose all privacy, we'll lose all shading. Okay. I'm just before I get into this also, it astounds me that the plan and justification report, including a separate section called character impact analysis, can claim that they're fully compatible with those criteria. That's mind-boggling. I hope you feel the same way. So we're recommending that the Fernbrook application not be approved. They've got no justification whatsoever for the rezoning. Okay? They fail the numerous criteria that we point out that's supposed to protect, that the town plan is supposed to protect our interests. Okay? They claim that it's appropriate housing for empty nesters who wish to stay in the neighborhood. That's what their marketing research claims. However, 10 years ago, Rotary Club decided to build Woodside Mews that you saw earlier. Their research concluded that seniors wanted small lots, bungalows, no stairs, low maintenance. Maybe an odd loft if you have a larger family that wants to visit. Okay? That's what they built. And I don't think seniors' interests have changed much over the 10 years because for the 30 units that exist at Woodside Mews, there's a standing waiting list of 92 people that want to buy whenever somebody moves out. I know that because my wife is the property manager at that place. If this plan were to be approved, I don't think either council or residents would like the consequences. Destabilization would be bad enough. Okay? The town spent a lot of time and effort and years getting the town plan developed and approved, and it would be a shame to erode its applicability in future development situations. Now, my old boss used to tell me, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution to a problem. I think there's a pretty simple solution to this problem. Retain existing zoning and build within character of the neighborhood. Okay? We get calls from local real estate agents several times a year. They've got a client list wanting to move into this neighborhood. They're choosing the neighborhood for the same reason we did. Okay? They want South Oakville, they don't want North Oakville. No criticisms against the Fernbrook architecture, but it would stick out like a sore thumb in our neighborhood. Please don't let that happen. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much for your information. I don't see any questions, but I appreciate very much hearing your information. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Blair Mangtalo.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and Council and everyone else who's here. I don't have a nice PowerPoint, but first I'd like to say that I agree with all the previous presentations, so I don't have to repeat most of that. In general, my family is opposed to the proposed rezoning. First I'll say, why did I buy my current house? I've lived in this neighborhood for about 17 years. I bought this house about 7 years ago. I like the area. Homes are set back from the street. The setback might officially be 9 meters, but if I look down my street, I don't see any house that's closer than 50 feet from the front street. So that building houses that are 15 feet from the front just is such a total difference in look. It's different. I'm not going to be excited about them being close by. I bought a house here that had mature trees. My understanding is they want to chop down most of the trees on their property. It's certainly not going to be a treed neighborhood. It's going to be a concrete jungle. I didn't buy a house to be in a concrete jungle. I like green grass. In these new streets, there will be maybe 20 by 20 foot lots of grass in the front. That's not really much grass. The street is open and quiet. There's 75-foot lots. I like a nice big lot. I used to have a house up on I think it was Selkirk, or maybe I rented on Selkirk and I lived a couple streets south of that, which was on like a 60-foot lot. I was living in a bungalow. I liked the fact that it was nice, lots of space. You could see your neighbors, but you had lots of space between them. It was a very nice and somewhat rural environment. Low height. I like the fact that the houses around me aren't towering over me. They're 25 feet high. These new homes are going to be 15 feet higher than that. That reminds me of North Oakville. The house size. The houses in the neighborhood are 3,000 feet or less in general. These homes, when you add two semis together that are each, my guess, at least 3,000 square feet, it's going to look like a 6,000 square foot house. That is massive. There's no way that the massing of it is not out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. The current homes are actually about 30 feet deep. If you measure from the front of the house to the back of the house, as far as like the two-story part, some people have got little single-story additions behind it, 30 feet deep. The proposed ones are 80. Like, this is just so much different than the character of the neighborhood. And the other thing is privacy, especially in the backyards. I'm going to talk a bit about this. This is one of my key areas of concern. Currently, what do I have? Homes in my backyard do not loom over their neighbors, and they're of similar height. They tend to be set back 50 to 60 feet from the fence line. The neighbor yards are the same elevation as yours, so you cannot see your neighbors unless they have a low fence. With the fence between me and one of my neighbors, I do have a lower fence, so that my daughter likes to watch his kids play in the backyard. He says, "I want to play with them, Dada." Yeah, wait a bit. So there's a minimum line of sight from neighboring homes. If I am close to my home, no one can see me. If I am standing at the back fence, yeah, people can see me a little bit, but not much. And it is basically, I consider it a nice, quiet, private oasis. In the proposed buildings, they're going to have homes that are 11 meters in height. That's measured from a point that, as discussed by Dawn, that's 2 meters higher than my property. Right? I happen to live at on Willow Ridge, up at the north part of the proposed development. I actually happen to be lucky in that I'm going to have an easement opposite me, so I'm not actually going to have a house right beside me, but I'm going to have 80 feet of wall that's running right beside me. Like if I look from my backyard, I'll see the whole side of that house, and I'll still have, the house will still be very imposing over me anyhow. These homes are going to be 40 feet in height, and something less than that back from the fence. In order to fit what they want to fit in, if they're maybe 30 feet back, then the angle, it's going to be something getting close to a 60-degree angle upwards from the fence line up to the top of their house. Currently, if I look at the houses on our street, it's about 25 feet high, but it's 50 to 60 feet away, so it's like a 1/2 of the height versus the distance, so that it's at a relatively low angle. This is going to be greater than a 1/1, so that it's going to be, there's no way that it's not going to be leaning over. The raised grading, where their basement is going to be at the height, starting at the height of my backyard, means that their first floor is going to start above the top of my fence. The second floor, first floor, and third floor are all going to be able to see into my backyard. If I measured correctly, I think the third floor is going to be able to see everything but about the 6 feet closest to my fence, is how much privacy I'm going to have in my backyard. Any decks that are built are going to be higher than my fence, is where the people's feet are going to be, and as such, I will not be able to ignore anyone sitting in their deck because they're going to be wide out in the open when I'm facing them. Noise is going to be much worse. The third floor loft is likely going to be able to see my neighbors on the other side of the street that I'm on, because they're going to look over the top of my house if they want to. Privacy in my backyard is going to cease to exist. I did not buy a house in North Oakville because I did not like the massive homes on small lots with no privacy. I bought a house in this neighborhood because I assumed the character of the neighborhood was going to stay the same and that I was going to get to have privacy in my backyard. If this development is built as requested, the character of my backyard will be destroyed. I have two other areas of concern. First of all, drainage. They claim that they have dealt with the drainage issues. I'm not certain I fully understand how. First, there is going to be much less grass in the area, so I'm not certain how they're going to be able to soak up the water as much. And secondly, they're going to raise the elevation by an extra meter, so I would have expected that since my backyard already is pretty moist in the spring, that there's a good chance it's going to be a lot more moist. Secondly, traffic. If you allow a development that has twice as many homes as would otherwise be permitted, you're going to have twice as many cars. And there's already times when Lakeshore is quite busy. If you have this condo that's being built with however many houses down on Bronte as another example of an increased volume, you have this in, you double the number of houses that are allowed, the traffic's going to get even worse. So that's basically what I'd like to talk about.
Thank you for coming and bringing us your information. I don't see any questions, but we appreciate having your input. Madam Clerk?
We have a delegation from Leslie Reed.
Ms. Reed? Mr. and Mrs. Reed? Ms. Reed, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Whoops, get back here. Thank you. Didn't want to seem too aggressive. Your mayors and councilors.
It wasn't you.
Okay.
It's a money-saving device we don't fix.
Tax dollars at work. My name is Leslie Reed. Having been a resident of Oakville since 1956 and a taxpayer since 1973, I have watched Oakville grow over these far too many years. It's about the history of our neighborhood. When our family home was built on Westdale Road in 1958, the Harvest Bible property was a mink farm. Calvary Baptist Church purchased the mink farm and moved its congregation from Lakeshore Road West and Wilson Street and created a fresh new smell to the property now owned by Fernbrook. Both congregations have been excellent, caring, and sharing neighbors. The home in which my husband and I have lived for the past 25 years, I also watched being built by my parents' best friends. Our property backs onto the west side of the church. Based on plans presented by Fernbrook, there will be a great loss of sunshine in my back garden, as you saw by the previous pictures. In this garden are thousands of plant specimens from Royal Botanical Gardens suited for sunny areas and where I spent 10 years with the auxiliary of the Royal Botanical Gardens and ultimately as their president. Many of my neighbors, also backing onto the west side of the property, have plant material from Royal Botanical Gardens, and not cheap, I might add, that will be affected by the loss of morning sunlight. On the east side of my home, facing the church, is the 400-foot square solarium in which I house over 85 unique tender trees, including citrus trees, grapefruits and lemons, shrubs, water plants, and other tender perennials purchased from Royal Botanical Gardens, and many of which are over 20 years old, all of which need the eastern sun for their health. The Fernbrook proposition places them in jeopardy. The majority of east and west neighbors adjoining the church property have mature trees at their back lot line. There is certainly a great fear amongst all of us that construction will destroy the root systems of these 50-year-old trees, leaving us no privacy whatsoever in our back gardens. Also, the underground stream is of great concern, and the drainage. If the grade is raised, where will the displaced water flow be directed? Having expressed some environmental and historical, but not all of my concerns, as they have been addressed by my fellow neighbors and asked not to be repeated to keep you happy, and our opposition to the present proposal, permit me to offer a possible and viable solution to that piece of property. As a part-time employee of Trafalgar Seniors Homes and as a volunteer as the housing representative on the Elder Services Advisory Committee for Halton, please let me share that the cry for seniors housing in Oakville is very loud, very clear, and 10 years behind the times. We aren't even out of the gate yet, and we're closing at the finish line to get things built. Could the church property be used or utilized for single-story dwellings for seniors? Single-story as stairs are the greatest complaint from senior Oakvillians who are on the waiting list for Woodside News, the 30-unit seniors life lease community on Woodside Drive. By providing seniors housing on the plot of land, it would allow our neighbors who feel the need to downsize to stay in the neighborhood with their friends around them. They would not have to move to another town or city and give their tax dollars to another community. Change their dentist, physicians, specialists, banker, library, church, personal care workers, etc. Additionally, our linked public transit on Lakeshore Road would be extremely convenient when driving becomes an issue. Think about our aging neighborhood in southwest Oakville. As you are all familiar with Halton Housing Strategy and Livable Oakville, I implore you to take my and my fellow neighbors' comments into consideration when you formulate your decision. And remember, you too will ultimately be looking for seniors housing in time in our own Oakville. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Madam Clerk?
There are no further delegations listed.
Oh, good. Volunteers, raise your hands. 1, 2, hold them up. I'm going to try and count you. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll start over here and go across. And ma'am, you're first. Sir, you're second. Oh, I lost your hands over here. Could you be third and you could be fourth? Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself and share your information with us.
Thank you. My name is Lina Stennis. I am a resident of 239 Sandwell Drive, so about one street away from the development. I echo all the concerns that my neighbors have expressed. And I just wanted to add that you've heard a lot of the testimonies from the people that are adjacent to this property. This is not a concern of just that group of people. It's a concern of the whole neighborhood and the community larger than that. Also wanted to share why we moved into this neighborhood. We came to Oakville from Toronto about 4 years ago. My husband grew up in Oakville, and we wanted that this community hasn't changed that much since when he grew up. The community, the council and the community have been able to maintain the character, and we hope that that would be the way that it would stay. When we moved in, we looked at the zoning. That was the first thing we we looked at when we bought our house. We would want to do some renovations to our house and expand to it. And the first thing we checked was, would the zoning allow to meet our criteria? And it does. I would imagine the developers that bought the land did the same thing when they acquired the property. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for expanding our awareness of the interest of the community in the surrounding area. Madam Clerk, oh no, sorry, sir, number 2, but you want to yield to number 3? Number 3. Now you're number 2, I think.
Okay. Well, I hope it's a good...
You're not related, are you?
I don't know. Who was it? Oh, no, I'm not related to that gentleman at all. I'm not, really. Thank you, Your Worship, and member of council. My name is Susan Garacino, and I'm a resident of Oakville. My husband and I and our 2 sons moved here 10 years ago. We used to reside in the lovely community of Woodstock, Ontario, where I served on City Council, the Executive Board of Woodstock General Hospital, as well as in many, many committees that City Councillors get involved in. So I know it's not easy to sit there as a City Councillor, listening to all the residents and trying to make a good decision for your community, but I do thank you for your public service. I know it's a tough job. Planners always have their own opinions, and council, thank goodness, are elected to represent the community and to the taxpayers. But a couple of things that I've noticed about this proposal by Fernbrook, and just something I have to draw on from some of the mistakes I've made previously as a councillor, and thought, oh yeah, that doesn't sound so bad, and then really ended up being pretty bad. One thing is that water. Water, no matter what engineers tell you, is very, very difficult to control. They put out a lot of plans, and then neighboring properties get flooded, and you think, that didn't work so well. So be very careful when you're looking at this proposal. Especially whatever zoning, keep the current zoning, that's what I'm telling you, but be very careful when the final development proposal goes forward that the water is dealt with. There is a portion of the land I know that the Conservation Authority is looking at that might be floodplain, and I did serve on the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, so please pay attention to that, because when you get into 100-year floods, we may be alive for it, we may not be, but you've got to be careful around floodplains. The other thing that I noticed about this proposal is that they talk about condominiums and condominium roads. That accrues quite a risk to a municipality, especially to the taxpayer's base. So as a taxpayer and one of your constituents, please be careful, because condominiums can go belly up. They all look great in front, but sometimes they don't go well. And who assumes the risk for the roads and for that condominium? And municipalities. And municipalities have been stung by them in the past. Didn't bring examples with me, but I'm sure that you're intelligent and well-seasoned councillors and know the risk of condominiums can bear upon municipalities and municipal taxpayers. And then I was a little bit disappointed that the planning department was remiss in not doing a shadow analysis or asking for that at the pre-consultation stage of this development. Given all the testimonies and presentations you saw regarding the height and the bungalows in the 1950s neighborhood, the architecture of the 1950s neighborhood and the lovely neighborhood that we live in, the shadow analysis would have shown very clearly and given key information to this council on what that impact would have been given the zoning and planning criteria you have to apply as city councillors. It's remiss in this application it's not there. I think there was some blocks of zoning, and I know one of the pictures was our pool closed for the season but soon to be opened. My concern, of course, for privacy and enjoyment of my property is not just the prayer gardens that one of my neighbors has got me started on, much to the chagrin of my husband's pocketbook and mine, but all the same, but also that we have a pool. And our pool is right there. We have lovely parties. You're all welcome in the summer anytime. Just drop in. But there will be very little sun. So my morning swims will basically be for the enjoyment of 13-meter housing behind me, and no sunlight on my pool at all. And it is solar heated, so it does have an adverse effect on my property. I'm trying to think of other figures to tell you, but mainly drainage, the condominium list, the taxpayers. Thank you very much for your public service, and I really hope you make the right decision and keep the character of our neighborhood the way it is and the way it should be for many, many years. Oh yeah, I forgot one more point. Fernbrook kept bringing up that the zoning on this plot of land, R1, R2, was old zoning, been around for a long time. I've been around for a long time. I kind of got better with age. I didn't get worse, I got better. Maybe worse in some areas. I can't quite do the jumping jacks I used to do or run the track. But you get wisdom as you get older. And zoning was put there a long time ago. Well, that proves the zoning was good back then, when council back then put it in place, and it's good for us now. So please honor the past councils in that zoning and honor the character of our neighborhood. Thank you very much for your time, Your Worship, and members of council.
Thank you for your information. Who's next? We're going back this way? No, we're going forward to number 4. Welcome. Please introduce yourself and share your information.
I'm Ella Landberger, and I live on Wolfdale Avenue, which is directly across the street from the properties being discussed. Good evening, councilors. And Kathy, my neighbor. I moved to Canada 12 years ago by choice, and my first home was 15 feet wide. So I was really excited when we moved to another home in Toronto. My house was now 20 feet wide because it meant my laundry basket, instead of going up the stairs like this, could be carried the wide way. When I saw the first proposal that came in from Fernbrook, I was shocked and dismayed to think that that kind of housing was about to go into an area when we had deliberately moved to livable Oakville, having broad areas and a lot of space. I have a great number of friends who live north of the highway, and I understand they have very nice, huge houses, but generally smaller lots. But the lots that they have, they usually maintain beautifully, and they garden the heck out of them. If you notice, south of the highway, most of the houses do have incredible lots, and yes, wasn't an avid gardener, but I inherited one, so now I'm an avid gardener too. But 15 feet wide, small, narrow area. 20 feet wide, a little bit more livable. Wider houses, bigger area, that's where I am at right now. This is not what belongs in our neighborhood at all. Also, there are the great properties in terms of the water runoff is a big concern. But all of that aside, the reason I'm standing up here is because I went to one of those very kind information sessions that Fernbrook held, and I'm sitting there doing a number crunch, having loved math. I'm like, okay, so if you had 15 houses or whatever the number would be, and you sell them for $2.5 million, you have X amount of money. They were proposing, at the time, 59 units, I think it is, and they had a more or less price range that they would do for them. So if you added up the 3 single houses, the semi-detached houses that were all of 15 feet wide, and the townhouses, the number crunch ended up being that you were going to sell the houses for the exact same amount of money. So I thought, why is it that they would still want to make so many more units in the same area? Well, the gentleman very kindly answered that, and he said, because our marketing people realized that there was no housing like this in the area, and I might be paraphrasing it, but there's no housing like this in this area, so it'd be easier to sell it because we'd be providing a variety of types of housing. Well, I don't know about you, but this is livable Oakville, not saleable Oakville. Please consider that when you're deliberating this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information and the potential new slogan. Is that a repeat request? Well, you didn't use all your time. I'll give it back to you.
I don't know if it was clear with any of the presentations, but I strongly oppose not just the rezoning, but the regrading of the site. The concept of building it up over a meter higher than it currently is, I strongly oppose that. That really is going to make this big plateau that I strongly oppose. I don't know if I was clear with that before, but I want to make certain I'm clear about it. Based on what the Hush property looks like, I really don't want that right behind me. So, thank you.
Actually, I caught that in my notes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry.
All right, sir? Please introduce yourself and share your information.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Ross Connell. I've lived on Willow Ridge for the past 22 years. Am I allowed to ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
This is actually a meeting where we receive your information, so you'd be...
I can try?
You could try, but we're not likely to... I don't know what our chances would be of answering it.
On the preponderance
Questions, however, they're always in order.
On the preponderance of the presentations by my neighbors, it's very clear what we want, and I join with them in their presentations. It's also clear that Fernbrook is in business to make money. But what I don't understand is what possible reason the town of Oakville or this council could have for going along with any one of the 17 exceptions that Fernbrook is asking for. What possible interest is there for the town in making an exception? I just don't understand.
Well, that's not a question that would be in order tonight, but I do promise you that if you'll stay through the entire process to the day when the recommendation report finally comes and council actually has the question in front of it, you'll be able to tell by how council votes as to how it feels on those questions. Thank you. So you just have to be patient. Now we have number 2. Come on up, please. Oh, wait, this is a repeat.
Yes, this is a question that's just occurred to me, actually.
Okay, well, you didn't use up your entire time, so I'm going to give you some back.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. It's a question that doesn't need an answer tonight. I'm actually making some suggestions. First of all, I think that the functional services report should be finalized before this is considered further. It's still in draft form, which suggests to me that the engineering firm that created it is not fully behind it yet. Secondly, in all of the submissions regarding grading, drainage, etc., there's one topic that seems to have been overlooked. We have an underground aquifer flowing through our neighborhood. Okay? There's been nothing that talks about the displacement effect of that water flow. It's one thing to get surface drainage, but there's been nothing that's done to address the flow of water that's underneath the surface of the area. I know that in the past years it heaved the concrete decking around our neighbor's pool. When we built our solarium on our house, the fact that we put 20 concrete pillars into the ground to support it, because it's a slab on grade, that diversion of water found its way into some, I guess, old cracks we had in our house that we hadn't had a leak before in 15 years. And with the start of that, we did, just by displacing that small amount of water. With the vast amount of foundations and everything that's going to be planted in that thing, there's got to be an impact on that. It can only go to the neighbors on adjacent sides. So I would respectfully ask that that be considered.
Well, I'm glad you came and asked that, and I'm sure it will be.
Thank you.
I saw another hand. Please come on down, introduce yourself, share your information. If you're minded to be another volunteer, why don't you move closer while we're hearing this gentleman. Please introduce yourself and share your information.
My name is Joe Ruvo. I live on Willow Ridge Court. I am impacted, I'm right in the middle of this, the proposed development, so I would be looking, I think, at about the 3rd or 4th unit that they're going to build. And I'm concerned, grading has come up, and I want to just point a couple of things out to you about the grading. This would be about 14 or 15 years ago. The church at that time was Calvary Baptist Church, and they did a renovation. They added a building, and they could not afford to move all the dirt away, and that's why that grading is what it is now. And I am, like all my predecessors here tonight, opposed to any increase in the grading, because what will happen, and I don't know if my two neighbors are here, but the backyards, right after what the church did was they just merely plowed the dirt, as you see it now, which is, about 5-6 feet higher than it was. When the snow melts, I had a river running through the north side of my property one year, which I think you know where I'm talking about. And I called the church, I called the town. The church sent out a work crew, a couple of guys with shovels to dig a ditch, which took the water flow for next spring and just put it on the other side of my property. And there was a flood there. My neighbor to the south was flooded out twice, and my neighbor to the north was flooded out twice due to this grading issue. And if I can go back even further, this has got to do with the school. They redid their track. They did the same thing. They dug the dirt out, and they dumped it on their property and graded it towards the people on Willow Ridge. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Well,
Thank you.
Those are pretty good pennies, and I thank you for that information. Come on down. Introduce yourself, please, and share your information.
Hello, my name is Veronica Zeroni. We live on Lake Shore and beside the pathway that's in question. Thank you for having me up. Talking about the water, I did inquire about the water and was given an email to look up, but I'm not an engineer. I didn't understand it, but I did read that they were going to put water storage tanks somewhere, perhaps in the parking area up by Blakelock. Now, our garden is underwater for a good 4 months of the year in the corner that abuts the church. And for a few years there, when I was able, I was digging round my neighbour's back fence to make the stream that should have been a stream drain away. And I would write to the church, or I'd go up to the church, and yes, they would put a volunteer committee on it, and then I ended up being the volunteer committee until I couldn't do it anymore. So we are aware of the water problem. When I was told that the houses on Tweedsdale were all burned towards this property because there is a natural waterway running through and round. Well, if they've changed their landscaping over the years, it can change the water flow. And the church has changed it. One of the things that Fernbrook chose not to answer was the fact that Blakelock was thinking of doing their track. A lot of water comes off Blakelock. If Blakelock modernizes like the Catholic high school does, with artificial turf and all that beautiful physical area, their water, is there an illegal arrangement that their water runs off into the church? Is the church, are Fernbrook aware that this water will have to be drained from that area? It is higher than the church. Thank you. That's my point.
Thank you very much. You've added another couple of cents to that drainage issue, and we appreciate that. I'll ask again if there's any other members of the public with information to share with council, and I'll gratefully accept that sign that there are no more. Thank you very much to everyone who brought the information to us, and we will see when staff return with their final recommendation where we get with all of that. Councillor Duddick, would you like to move the recommendation?
Your Worship, the applicant didn't want to
They resisted all my invitations.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll move the receipt of the comments, and Councillor DeMoff and myself will be following up with staff to pursue some of the issues that have been addressed this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The recommendation is carried. Now, that brings us to our discussion items, and the first discussion item is the 2 and 2A items that we moved from the agenda earlier. Councillor Duddick? Oh, okay. 5 minutes. The counselors want me to explain to you that we've moved on, but I think you knew that. And I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have a brief recess so that any who wish to leave can do so without any fear of disturbing us. Council, a 5-minute bio break, and then we're back to work, right?